She escaped her own wedding, running for her life, in a torn bridal dress. But she had no idea the stranger who stopped to help her was a billionaire who would risk everything to hide her. Run. Don't look back. Those were the only words echoing in Arya's mind as she bolted through the crowded train station, her breath coming in sharp, desperate bursts. People turned to look, some confused, some startled, some whispering as a young woman in a torn bridal dress sprinted past them like she was fleeing for her life. And she was. Her dress, once elegant and custom-stitched for the extravagant ceremony planned by her influential family, now clung to her legs, the expensive lace snagged and stained from the frantic escape. Her veil, white and delicate, fluttered behind her like a wounded bird, half-ripped, barely holding on. The wedding bells she left behind were still ringing in her ears. But to Arya, they weren't announcing joy. They were a warning, a reminder of the cage she was born into. Her father's voice echoed in her head, calm, authoritative, and terrifying in its certainty. You will marry him. This is your duty. Our family's reputation depends on it. Arya's stomach twisted. Her father had arranged her marriage to a man twice her age. A man known not just for his influence and wealth, but for his cruelty. His wife had mysteriously disappeared, though everyone knew the truth and pretended not to. And now, Arya was supposed to be next. Nothing more than a symbol, a trophy, a possession. A cage wrapped in silk. She didn't want a gilded prison. She didn't want a life chosen for her. She wanted air. She wanted freedom. She wanted herself back. Her lungs burned as she pushed through the station crowds, her fingers trembling, her heart hammering so loudly she wondered if everyone around her could hear it. The marble floors blurred beneath her feet, as if the world itself was trying to pull her back. Security guards shouted somewhere behind her. Someone must have noticed she'd vanished from the ceremony, slipped out the back door unnoticed, and run straight into the city, determined to disappear. She had no bag, no phone, no plan, just a dress, a heartbeat, and fear sharp enough to cut through steel. At the far end of the platform, a train was about to depart. The digital sign above it flickered as if urging her to hurry. With a final burst of strength, she dove inside just as the doors hissed closed behind her. She stumbled forward, catching herself on one of the metal poles. The train lurched into motion, and the world outside blurred into streaks of gray and gold. Her chest heaved as she looked around, expecting anyone, from her father's men to come charging in. But no one did. Slowly, painfully, reality sank in. She made it. She escaped, if only for a moment. The train car was nearly empty. A couple of elderly passengers sat whispering to each other. A teenage boy stared at his phone, completely oblivious. A mother rocked her infant, humming softly. And then there was him. Sitting alone in the dimly lit corner of the car was a man with presence, calm, confident, composed in a way that made the noisy world shrink around him. He sat with perfect posture, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, hands clasped loosely, watching the city flash past the window. But when Arya entered, frazzled, breathless, dressed in chaos, he lifted his gaze. And their eyes met. Arya froze. He had eyes that didn't just look at her, they saw her. Saw the fear. Saw the urgency. Saw something was terribly wrong. She tried to straighten herself, but her hands were shaking too badly. She hoped, prayed. He wouldn't ask questions. She didn't have the strength to lie, or explain, or unravel the nightmare she'd just escaped. But the man didn't demand anything. Not her name. Not her story. Not a single explanation. He studied her for a heartbeat, calm, steady, quietly observant, then spoke in a voice so controlled, so gentle, that she felt the panic inside her chest loosen just a little. Do you need help? Just 4 words. Soft, careful, human. Arya blinked hard, her eyes stinging with tears she couldn't afford to shed. She hadn't heard kindness all day. Not from her father. Not from the groom's family. Not from anyone who looked at her like she was a bargaining chip. Now, a stranger was offering help without conditions. She swallowed. I don't. But the words got stuck in her throat. His gaze didn't waver. Are you hurt? He asked, standing slowly, making sure not to frighten her further. No, she whispered. Just scared. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, but understanding. He stepped closer, leaving a respectful distance, and lowered his voice. You look like someone who's running from something. His eyes softened. Or someone. Arya's breath hitched. The train rattled on, humming beneath her feet. But suddenly it felt like the only two people in motion were the two of them. Everything else faded. She finally managed a small nod. The man took a quiet breath, then offered something she never expected. Safety. Stability. A promise. I can help you, he said. But only if you want me to. Arya stared at him. Why would a stranger help her? Why would he care? Why would he risk anything for her? But something about him, his calm voice, his steady eyes, his controlled presence, felt like an anchor in the raging storm inside her. And she didn't know it yet, but the man standing before her wasn't just anyone. He was Elias Ward, one of the most powerful men in the city. A billionaire CEO known for his cold logic and razor-sharp decisions. A man the world feared, respected, and whispered about. Yet here he was, offering help to a runaway bride with nothing to her name. Arya's lips trembled. She didn't realize it then, but the moment she whispered yes to his offer, her entire life changed. Forever. Arya hesitated, her legs trembling as if they were no longer hers. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to trust no one. That was all she'd known, fear, control, rules that suffocated her. But as she looked into Elias's steady, unreadable eyes, something inside her, something small, fragile, bruised, began to loosen. Trust. Or maybe it was desperation in disguise. I'm being forced into a marriage, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clattering train tracks. They will come looking for me. For a moment, Elias said nothing. He studied her carefully, not with suspicion, but with the quiet focus of someone weighing every detail, every tremor in her voice, every fear behind her eyes. Then he leaned forward, his tone low and calm. Do you want to leave that life behind? Arya nodded, not slowly, not timidly, but with the fierce certainty of someone who had finally reached the edge of her breaking point. Elias's next words felt like a lifeline thrown across an ocean. Then come with me. She blinked, her heartbeat stumbling. Why would you help me? She asked, genuinely confused. No one had helped her before. Not by choice. Not freely. Elias's jaw tightened, a shadow flickering through his eyes. Pain, maybe. Regret. Something unspoken. Because once, he said quietly, I also needed someone to help me escape. Arya felt the breath catch in her chest. He didn't explain further, and she didn't ask. Something about the heaviness in his voice told her it wasn't a story he gave easily. He stood, offering his hand, not grabbing, not pulling, simply waiting. Her pulse raced as she stared at it. This was a stranger, a powerful stranger, a man who could ruin her life or save it with equal ease. But the world she was running from? That world would kill the pieces of her that were still alive. So she stepped forward. Elias guided her off the train, every movement calm and measured, like he knew she might bolt if he moved too suddenly. She followed him through the terminal, each step a blend of fear and disbelief. Whispers followed them, Arya in her disheveled wedding dress, Elias in his tailored suit, but he didn't look back. Outside, a sleek black car waited under the glow of the streetlights. The driver, sharp posture, professional, unreadable, opened the back door without a word. Clearly, this was not the first time he had dealt with unusual circumstances. Elias motioned her inside. Arya hesitated again, gripping the edge of her dress. Getting into that car felt like crossing a point of no return. But then she remembered the cold hands of the man she was supposed to marry. The threats whispered behind closed doors. The cage she'd lived in her entire life. She climbed in. The soft leather seats swallowed her in comfort she wasn't used to. Elias slid in beside her, but he didn't crowd her. He left space, an unspoken promise that she wasn't trapped. As the car pulled away from the curb, Arya's hands trembled in her lap. The city lights streaked across the windows, painting her in flashes of gold and shadow. Where are we going? She asked quietly. Elias turned his gaze to her, his expression steady. To a place where no one can find you. His confidence should have frightened her. It didn't. It felt like safety wrapped in certainty. Minutes passed in silence, thick, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Arya kept her eyes fixed on the glowing skyline, trying to keep her thoughts from spiraling. Would her father be furious? Yes. Would he send people to search for her? Absolutely. Would her fiancé hunt her down? Without a doubt. The more she thought about it, the colder her blood felt. Elias's voice cut through her panic, soft but grounding. You're safe right now. Whatever you left behind, it cannot reach you here. His calmness was unnerving and oddly comforting. The car turned into a private driveway lined with black stone pillars and subtle lights embedded in the pavement. Arya leaned forward, her breath catching as a towering glass building rose before them, disappearing into the night sky like a column of light. The Ward Residences. She recognized the name immediately. It wasn't just expensive. It was legendary. Only a handful of the world's wealthiest people had ever set foot inside. And he was taking her there? The car stopped under a covered entrance. A valet nodded respectfully at Elias. No one questioned the runaway bride stepping out beside him. Arya froze. I can't stay here, she stammered. This is too much. I don't belong in a place like this. Elias stepped closer, but still gave her space, like he knew she might crumble. You belong anywhere you choose to be, he said softly. And right now you choose safety. Her throat tightened. The elevator ride felt unreal, silent, smooth, ascending high above the city she once knew. Each second felt like it pulled her further from her old life and deeper into a world she never imagined for herself. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse so vast and breathtaking it made her chest ache. Floor-to-ceiling windows, soft ambient lights, a living space larger than her entire childhood home, warm wood floors, a view of the entire sparkling city below them. And for the first time that night, Arya felt her lungs fill fully. A breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Freedom. Soft. Quiet. Terrifying. Beautiful. Elias watched her carefully, his voice gentle. You're safe here. No one knows you exist. No one will find you. Arya swallowed hard, emotions swelling in her chest until her eyes burned. It was crazy. It was reckless. It was impossible. But standing in that penthouse, surrounded by silence and safety, for the first time in her life, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Days passed slowly, softly, gently, like the world was finally giving Arya permission to breathe again. She was no longer the trembling runaway bride in a torn wedding dress. She was healing, piece by fragile piece. She laughed again, small, hesitant laughs at first, then real ones. She slept through the night, without waking up in fear. And each morning, she found herself feeling a little more like someone she had once dreamed she could be. Elias didn't hover, but he was always present. Every evening, without fail, he returned to the penthouse. Sometimes late, sometimes exhausted from long hours of meetings and negotiations, still wearing the weight of a billionaire CEO's world on his shoulders, but he always came back. And he never came empty-handed. One night it was a soft lavender blanket. The next, a novel he said reminded him of courage. Another evening, it was a tiny box of pastries from a bakery he said took 20 minutes of arguing with the chef to get. Another night still, a simple gray sweater that he claimed he bought because the penthouse gets cold in the winter. He always pretended it was nothing. No big deal. Just practical things. But Arya saw through it. Each gesture was gentle, thoughtful, almost protective. These weren't gifts. They were small pieces of comfort, pieces of safety, pieces of him, saying without words, "You matter here." She could feel her heart soften in ways that frightened her. One evening, Arya stepped out onto the massive balcony that wrapped around the penthouse, like a quiet cliff above the city. The wind lightly brushed her hair as she leaned against the glass railing. The skyline sparkling below, like 1,000 stars, had fallen and gotten stuck in the streets. The world beneath her looked so small, so distant, so manageable from up here. Elias joined her a moment later, standing beside her with a quiet presence that didn't need words. "You live so high above everyone," Arya said, her voice carrying in the cool night air. You must never feel scared. Elias shook his head, his expression gentle but firm. Money doesn't erase fear, he said softly. It just changes what you're afraid of. She glanced at him, surprised. He rarely spoke about himself. He rarely revealed anything about his past. He was a fortress, strong, silent, impenetrable. But tonight something shifted. I grew up with nothing, he said, eyes fixed on the lights below. No safety, no stability, no one to rely on. Aria's heart tightened. My parents, they weren't the kind of people who cared for anyone but themselves. I learned early that if I wanted to survive, I had to fight for every inch. He took a slow breath. I know what it means to run, Aria. I know what it means to fear a life you were forced into. The sadness in his voice was quiet, raw, unpolished, like exposing a wound he usually kept stitched shut. Aria turned to him fully. Why did you help me? She asked softly. You had no reason to. You didn't know me. Elias met her gaze, and for once, he didn't look away. Because you looked like someone who deserved a life she chose, not one that was chosen for her. The words hit her like a warm hand pressed to a cold heart. For a moment, Aria couldn't speak. Her throat tightened. Her eyes stung. No one, not her father, not the fiancé she escaped, not anyone in her old life, had ever cared what she wanted. But this stranger, this powerful, guarded man, he saw her, really saw her, and that terrified her more than the world she ran from. She stepped away from the railing, suddenly needing a breath to steady herself. The air inside the penthouse was warm, scented lightly of cedar and vanilla. Elias followed her in, but he didn't push. He gave her space, watching her with quiet concern. Meanwhile, outside their fragile bubble of safety, the world was growing louder. Aria's father was not a man who took disobedience lightly. The morning after she ran, he publicly announced a reward, an enormous sum, for anyone who could locate his daughter. Her picture was posted online, her name broadcasted on local stations. Her father claimed she was missing, but everyone who knew him understood the truth. He wasn't trying to save her. He was trying to drag her back. Her arranged fiancé was even worse. He was furious, humiliated. In his circles, power was everything, and losing a bride made him look weak. He sent men across the city, private investigators, hired muscle, anyone willing to hunt down the girl who dared run from him. Aria didn't know any of this. Not yet. But Elias did. His contacts were everywhere. His security team monitored the city, and every update they delivered only made the situation more dangerous. One morning, Elias found one of his guards waiting outside his office, face tense. They're gathering information, the man said, asking around high-end residences. They haven't reached this building yet, but they will. Elias's jaw hardened. Keep every entrance secured. Increase surveillance. And no one comes near the penthouse without my authorization. Yes, sir. He knew it was only a matter of time before Aria's old life came chasing, but he refused to let them reach her. That evening, when he returned to the penthouse, Aria was curled on the couch reading the book he'd brought her 2 days before. She looked peaceful, finally, blissfully peaceful, and for a moment, Elias simply watched her, letting the sight of her calm melt the tension from his shoulders. Welcome back, she said, closing the book gently. Her voice carried warmth now. Something new. Something tender. Elias swallowed the truth he wanted to tell her. That danger was closing in. He didn't want to steal her peace. Not yet. Not when she'd only just begun to reclaim it. She smiled, unaware of the storm growing just beyond their sanctuary. But the storm was coming. And soon, it would reach their door. It happened on a night when the sky felt heavier than usual. The kind of night where the rain didn't just fall, it attacked the city, flooding streets and drowning out thoughts. Aria stood barefoot in the penthouse kitchen, humming softly as she stirred warm tea. For the first time in days, she felt calm. Elias had just returned from a long meeting and gone to shower. The steady sound of rain against the windows almost felt comforting. Almost. Until the sharp buzz of the security phone broke the peace. Aria frowned. They rarely used that line. It was reserved for emergencies. She wiped her hands and answered, her voice soft. Hello. Mr. Ward. The guard's voice came through, tense and low. "We have a situation." Arya felt her stomach tighten. There are men in the lobby asking about a missing bride. They have her picture and claim they're here under urgent family orders. The blood drained from her face. She didn't remember dropping the phone, but she heard it hit the marble floor. Her breathing turned shallow. Her hands trembled violently. They found her. Not fully, not yet, but they were close. Too close. Before panic could swallow her, Elias appeared in the hallway, towel around his neck, hair damp, shirt halfway buttoned. He froze when he saw her expression. "Arya." He crossed the room in 3 long strides. "What happened?" She couldn't speak. She just pointed at the security phone lying on the floor. Elias picked it up and listened to the guard's message replaying. As he set the phone down, his entire demeanor shifted. His jaw hardened. His shoulders squared. The warmth in his eyes turned into a quiet, dangerous focus. He didn't waste a second. "Come with me," he said firmly, grabbing her hand. Arya could barely keep up as he led her through the penthouse, past the living room, past the study, straight to a towering bookshelf. He pressed a hidden button. With a low, mechanical rumble, the shelf slid open to reveal a narrow, dimly lit passage. Arya's breath caught. "What is this?" "A safe room," Elias said. "Only a few people know it exists." She stepped inside, heart pounding. The room was surprisingly spacious, soft lighting, a small bed, shelves of emergency supplies, a communication panel, even a bathroom. Not a bunker, a sanctuary. But her hand still shook. "Stay in here," Elias whispered. "No matter what you hear. Don't open the door until I come back." Her voice cracked. "Elias, what if they take me before you return?" He held her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "They won't." His voice was fierce, unwavering. "I won't let them." Before she could respond, he stepped back, and the door slid shut. Arya pressed her ear against the cool metal, every muscle in her body tight with fear. Then came the sounds. Footsteps, voices, elevator dings, arguments. The guards downstairs trying to hold the line. Men insisting on seeing the upper floors. Rain slamming against the windows like a furious heartbeat. Every noise echoed through her bones. Minutes dragged like hours. Her thoughts spiraled. What if they forced their way in? What if Elias was overwhelmed? What if this was the last safe place she'd ever know? She sank to the floor, wrapping her arms around her knees, fighting back tears she thought she'd run out of. She had escaped once, but escape didn't always mean freedom. Sometimes it just meant running until someone stronger stood in front of you to shield the storm. And right now, that someone was Elias. She didn't know why he cared so much, why he helped her, why he risked everything. But in that moment of trembling uncertainty, one truth hit her. He didn't treat her like a burden. He treated her like someone worth fighting for. The longer the silence stretched, the more unbearable it became. And then, a soft mechanical click. The door slid open. Elias stood there. His hair was soaked. His clothes clung to him from the rain. His breathing was heavy. His shirt wrinkled from tension. And his jaw was still clenched like he'd been holding back fury. But when he looked at her, his eyes softened instantly. Arya didn't even think. She ran straight into his arms, crashing into his chest, grabbing fistfuls of his damp shirt as if afraid he'd disappear. "Elias!" Her voice broke completely. "I was so scared." His arms wrapped around her, strong, warm, steady. "I know," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "But you're safe. They didn't get past the lobby. They know nothing about this floor, nothing about you. But what if they come back?" Her voice was small, shaky. "What if this never stops?" He cupped her face gently. "You're not alone anymore, Arya." His voice carried a promise deeper than anything she'd ever heard. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Her heartbeat stuttered. Together. A word she'd never been allowed to have. Arya swallowed. "What do I do now?" Elias took a slow breath, his eyes searching hers. "Now you choose." She blinked, stunned. He continued, voice low and steady. "If you want to disappear to another country, I'll arrange everything. A new identity. A new home. A new life where no one can ever touch you again. Her breath hitched. But if you want to stay, he stepped closer, his fingers brushing her cheek. Then I'll protect you. Here, with everything I have. No matter the cost. The room felt smaller suddenly. Warmer. Her pulse echoed in her ears. Arya looked up at him. Really looked. At the man who had opened his home to her. The man who shielded her from danger. The man who asked nothing in return, but gave everything without hesitation. Her voice trembled, but this time, it wasn't from fear. I want to stay, she whispered. Elias inhaled sharply, as if those words struck deep inside him. With you, she added, softer but certain. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Elias's hand slid gently to the back of her head, pulling her closer, not possessively, but protectively. Then you stay, he murmured, as long as you want. Maybe she should have felt uncertain. Maybe she should have questioned the future. But instead, standing there in the soft glow of the safe room, listening to the storm fade outside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real fragile, terrifying hope. And this time, she didn't run from it. She stepped into it, and into him. Weeks drifted by softly, almost dreamlike, like time itself had slowed down just for the two of them. The world outside the penthouse kept spinning with its noise, demands, and dangers, but inside was peace. A strange, beautiful peace Arya had never known. Every morning, she woke to the gentle smell of coffee. Elias always made it before leaving for work, even though he rarely drank it himself. He said it was because the aroma made her smile. Every evening, he returned not as a billionaire CEO, not as the city's most untouchable man, but simply as Elias, the only person who looked at her like she was more than her past, more than her fear. Their days fell into a quiet rhythm. They cooked together, laughing when she failed to flip pancakes or when he accidentally added salt instead of sugar. They watched movies until they fell asleep on the couch. They exchanged stories, painful ones, funny ones, ones they'd never dared to share with anyone. One night, Arya admitted the truth in a whisper. I always thought love was something that was forced on women like me. Elias looked at her for a long moment before responding. Love is never something you're pushed into, Arya, he said softly. It's something you choose, even when it scares you. Those words stayed with her, because choosing, that was something she had never been allowed to do. The penthouse slowly became more than a hiding place. It became a home. She learned which corners caught the morning sun, which windows revealed the prettiest night skyline, which cabinet held the chocolate-covered almonds Elias pretended not to like, but secretly loved. Elias learned, too. He learned that Arya hummed when she was nervous, that she always tilted her head a little before asking a deep question, that she found thunderstorms comforting because they made the world chaotic enough to match her thoughts. Little things. Gentle things. Things only people who truly cared noticed. Love didn't crash into them suddenly. It appeared slowly, quiet, steady, like sunrise sneaking through curtains. And though neither of them said the word out loud, it lived in their small moments. In the way Elias would pause work, just because she walked into the room. In the way Arya would look for him first in any silence. In the way their hands brushed and neither pulled away. But even in peace, fear has a way of whispering. One evening, the rain tapped gently against the balcony glass. Arya stood outside, the whole city glowing beneath her like a field of stars. Elias joined her a moment later, settling beside her quietly. Beautiful night, he said. Arya nodded, eyes fixed on the glittering skyline. But her voice was far away when she spoke. Elias, what if they come again? His chest tightened at the tremor in her words. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, pulling her gently against him. She melted into his warmth instinctively. Once a fragile soul, now someone learning to breathe again. He spoke near her ear, voice low, steady, certain. Then they'll find a woman who isn't afraid anymore. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders softening. And they'll find a man who will fight for her, he added. Arya turned to face him, her eyes shimmering, not with fear, but with something deeper, something safer. Why do you believe in me so much? She whispered. Elias brushed a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Because when I look at you, he said, I don't see a runaway bride. I see a woman who had the courage to run toward her freedom. That alone makes you stronger than anyone chasing you. Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken about her strength. They had spoken about her duty, her obedience, her place. But strength? That word had never belonged to her. Until now. Elias continued softly. And whatever comes next, you don't face it alone. Not anymore. Her heart fluttered, steadying against the old wounds and new hopes inside her. Days turned into weeks, weeks into their own gentle world. Together, they began planning small things, new recipes to try, places Arya wanted to see once it was safe, books they wanted to read together. For the first time, Arya allowed herself to imagine a future. Not the one she had been forced into, not the one chosen by others, but one she could build with someone she trusted. She remembered her old life, rooms filled with gold but no warmth, rules that tightened around her like chains, people who saw her as a bargaining chip rather than a daughter. And now she spent mornings wrapped in soft blankets, sipping coffee while watching the city wake. She danced barefoot in the kitchen when she thought Elias wasn't looking. She laughed, really laughed, so often that even the guards downstairs started smiling more. She was no longer surviving. She was living. But the greatest shift of all happened one quiet night. Elias was sitting on the floor beside the couch, sorting through documents while Arya painted her nails lazily. It was one of those soft nights where everything felt slow and safe. She looked at him, his sleeves rolled up, his expression focused, his presence warm and grounding, and she realized something that took her breath away. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her past, not of her future, not of the men searching for her, not of choosing a life different from the one she was born into. She wasn't hiding. She was healing. Because the truth was simple. Arya had escaped an arranged marriage, but in doing so, she discovered something far more powerful. A love she chose. A home she chose. A future she chose. The city lights sparkled beneath the penthouse, like witnesses to her rebirth. She leaned her head against Elias's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her automatically, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment she understood. Sometimes the best stories don't begin with perfection. They begin with chaos, with fear, with running. They begin with a girl in a torn bridal gown, and a stranger with kind eyes who decided she was worth saving. Elias kissed the top of her head gently. "You're safe," he murmured. "And you're free." Arya closed her eyes, letting the truth settle over her like a warm blanket. Because love doesn't always arrive to save you. Sometimes love hides you, protects you, gives you space to grow wings. Until one day, you're strong enough to save yourself. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more powerful, emotional tales. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.